Hello, it's day 46, and I want to talk about the monster. Okay, Diet Buddy, before we start today, I'm giving you a trigger warning. I very rarely give trigger warnings because I figure we're all mature adults and we can decide what we do or don't want to engage with ourselves. You know, it's good to challenge yourself, but I really do want to say that today is going to be kind of a downer. I'm going to be talking briefly about self-harm. So if that's something that you even remotely have trouble with, or you're even just a tiny bit unsure if you really want to go there today, that's completely fine. Consider this day done. We'll talk tomorrow, all right? Okay. Weeks ago, I briefly alluded to the fact that there was a family member of mine growing up who was very, very judgmental of my size and of what I eat. Today, I want to talk about that family member. It's not my parents. My parents are awesome. It's not my grandparents. It is my brother. It is my older brother. So, my brother is 8 years older than me. And when we were children, that 8 years felt like a lifetime. He was so much bigger than me and he was just a presence. All right. And to give you an idea of what kind of person he was, one of my earliest memories is of him hanging out of a second-story window, threatening to let go if my mom didn't give him what he wanted. If you were to encounter a kid like him at the grocery store, your first thought would be, oh my God, those poor parents. That's the kind of kid he was. He's my half-brother. We don't have the same dad. My brother hounded me about my weight. He still does. But when we were kids, he made it like a full-time job. He would follow me around. He would find me if I hid. It got so bad that when I was a preteen, I knew the sound of his truck, and I could hear it when it was still miles away, and if I heard it, I would run and hide. There really was no relief from just the constant mental barrage. My parents really weren't much help. My dad didn't feel like he could discipline him because, he wasn't his real dad. And my mom has always had the opinion of boys will be boys. And she used to tell me that I should feel lucky. She had 3 brothers who were really awful to her. And I only have one, so why can't I deal with it? But I really don't think she understood how constant it was. And I think if she did, I don't know, I'd like to think that she would have said something to him, but what could she have done? He was awful. I do think that he's part of the reason that I became as close to nature as I did. Because when I was a little girl, the forest was a safe place for me. We had this creek that went behind our house, and I would follow that creek for miles and miles because he couldn't follow me in the woods. He was a big, galumphing giraffe of a boy. So in the woods, I could hide. So I spent hours and hours back there. No friends, no toys, just doing the things that little girls do in the woods, communing with the spirits and building little grass altars to strange, forgotten gods. The normal stuff. But unfortunately, last year, when I bought my property and moved with my parents, I live less than 3 miles away from my brother's house now, and he comes over very often, so we've been seeing more and more of each other. It's been okay, it's been an uneasy truce, until last night. Last night at dinner, we were having sandwiches, and when my brother sat down at the table, he said, "Wow, these sandwiches are really huge." Okay, fine, not too strange, but it did set my little antenna vibrating, if you know what I mean. I could feel it coming. And when we were about halfway through the meal, I was about halfway done with my sandwich, he put his sandwich down and said, "Oh, there's no way I can finish this." And my mom kind of laughed and said, "Oh, well, I'm finishing mine." And as I ate, he turned to me and said, "Geez, look at her. Look at her. It's like watching one of those competitive eaters." and I lost it, you guys. I know I put a trigger warning before this video, but if you have never truly been triggered, you don't know what it's like. I almost started a domestic incident yesterday. I had to put my sandwich down and leave the room. My God, it pulled me straight back to those feelings I used to have. And of course, he never directly calls me fat. There's always a little bit of reasonable doubt in what he says. Because if he actually called me fat, then, that's unacceptable. Somebody would call him out for it. But since he didn't, he could just say, "Oh, it was a joke. Why are you being so sensitive?" And you know what? My parents, after he was gone, like, "Kara, are you okay? What happened there?" They just don't understand. They just don't understand, and they never will. And I don't even expect them to. I think that part of becoming an adult is learning to separate your own inner voice from the contamination of all of the things that your bullies have said. This has always been really apparent to me when it comes to those fat acceptance people. The people who will say, "Fat is beautiful, fat is fine, you are still worthy and worthwhile if you're fat." And I listen to those people. I even say those words myself sometimes, and there's a little voice in me that says, "Not really, though." It is so different when you live with your bully. By the time I even got to school, I was already a ground down little stump of a girl. I had no self-confidence. My self-loathing was through the roof. I knew I was fat, I knew I was ugly, and I knew I was unlovable. So by the time my schoolyard bullies got to me, there really was no escape except into the woods. It was my brother when I was at home. It was my bullies when I was at school. There really was nothing for me to do except hide with a book or dive into a video game and just forget all of the horrible things that were happening to me. And of course, there was that accompanying thought, if I was just a little bit less fat, none of this would be happening. My life would be totally different. This is what I mean when I say that being overweight to me feels like a childish problem. It feels like something I should have already conquered. It feels like something I can't get past because I have been fat for so long, and it still affects me in the exact same way. And I'm not a fool. I'm a realist. I understand that I'm not just going to transform into a Victoria's Secret model if I lose 100 pounds. I'm still going to look like myself. And even if I did magically transform into some supermodel, some beautiful person, if I did transform into Rosé from Blackpink, I'm still going to be carrying these feelings from when I was fat. And that's part of the reason I'm still alone. Part of the reason I can't connect with anyone. Because there's a part of me that says it's not safe. It's not safe to put yourself out there. But I do think I've been getting better. I've been really fighting my perfectionism. Like that feeling that everything has to be perfect or it's not worth having. Like a year ago, if you had told me that I'd be able to put YouTube videos out there where anyone might see them, I would have told you you were nuts. There's no way. It's too scary. I've made a ton of progress in tackling things I thought were scary. I can mow my own lawn now. I used to be terrified of the lawnmower. I can build a chicken coop. That's right, I can run a table saw. I can make YouTube videos. I can talk to you, and you're actually very easy to talk to. Much easier than I thought you'd be. But the monster chases me. It chases me every day, and I wish I could get away from him. If I could go through the rest of my life and never speak to my brother again, I absolutely would. But it's not an option. It's not. I know a lot of advice online will tell you to cut your emotional abuser out. Don't give them the time of day. But if I do that, I lose my connection to my family. I lose my mom and dad. I'd have to cut them out too. And a lot of the advice online would say, they're enablers. Of course you should cut them out too. But I love my mom and dad. And even if that wasn't enough, my brother has 2 children, daughters. What if someday he starts in on them the way he did on me? If that ever happens, I have to be there. I have to be there to reassure them, to protect them. I mean, I know I would be a pretty flimsy shield, but it's better than what I had when I was a kid. No shield. If you're overweight, if you're obese, especially if you've been obese since you were a kid, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's the go-to insult. It's how people end arguments with you, by calling you fat. There's no way to come back from that, because you know it's true. And that's part of the reason why, especially if you're an adult now, still struggling with your weight, you have to weed through that voice in your head. You have to curate it. You can't believe everything it says, because it's not your friend. Part of it is you, of course, but part of it is the bullies. It takes a long time. And I'm just now starting to realize that the only voice that matters when it comes to my weight is mine.